Well, welcome to the Two Bridges Art Academy. Thank you for coming again. Today I'd like to work out a quick sketch of Andrew Wyeth and his father, N.C. Wyeth, two of my favorite illustrators. This is hard to see their faces, and that's kind of why I picked it. I just immediately was interested in their big shapes here, their raincoats, looking over the ocean. It'd be a fantastic scene if I capture it right. The choice of paper I'm thinking about using is a Strathmore toned gray paper here. Why would I pick that? Often artists want to have a good mix of light color values, middle tone values, and then dark values in the drawing. And right away we have our middle tone values in this paper. So this might be a good medium paper to work on. Now before I get going here, we often encourage our students to work out a thumbnail sketch. And what's a thumbnail sketch? Well, a thumbnail sketch is essentially, so it's going to be a little bit bigger than my thumbnail, of course, but is to work out the shapes that I'm going to be looking for in my final drawing. And in this case, I'm going to mimic on my sketch paper here my two figures there. I'm going to look at my horizon line quickly. Where the white water comes up might be the good start. And then I'm right away going to jump into the big shapes of Andrew here on the left. And when I look at him, I see nothing more than just basically a big rectangle pylon. And that's something we really spend a lot of time in my beginner drawing class going over, how to look for these shapes and how to establish these shapes and how to utilize them in every form of our art. I'll look for NC here. Again, I'm not trying to draw him, I'm just trying to look at that big shape that I'm seeing. And you could look at that a number of different ways. It could be a triangle, it could be a rectangle, a combination of both. That's part of the fun. And when you're looking at something to render what we're trying to see. And you can see right away in my thumbnail sketch here that I drifted too close to my border here. So the nice thing about thumbnail sketches is I just adjust the border. And I adjust it that way and I'm back on track. So I'm not going to spend too much time here doing much of a thumbnail sketch. It's really only to start looking for things that are going to help me when I move on to my final piece of paper here. But it's a good way to, again, familiarize yourself with some potential issues that might happen and just get your hand moving, all the good things. Another thing we'll spend a lot of time in my beginner drawing class talking about is a space in between objects. So right here, as I look at that established line where his shoulder goes down, Andrew's, and then comes over this line, I would see that right away that'd be a spot right there that I'd really want to showcase. Get that right, and a lot of this will fall into place. So that we call it a negative space. An additional spot right there. Of course, in the background. In the height differentiation, I have NC here a little bit too high, and Andrew will be higher. So once I establish those things, and I can see that right there by drawing an imaginary line from where his hat is straight across, and it's a little bit taller than here. It's almost the same, but not close enough. Okay, so once my hand's moving, I feel pretty good. Now it's time to transfer my sketch or get my hand moving on my big piece of paper right here. So just about established my enough sketchy lines right here to start to put on the final shading and utilize that white charcoal to give it a secondary tone on the toned paper. And just making my checks here. I mentioned in my previous thumbnail sketch that one of the spots I thought would be important was the shoulder coming down of Andrew here, and then the space, that negative space between his father and C. I think that's pretty good. Establish where that horizon line is right there. And then the negative space down below his folded arm into that triangle shape right there. So again, I'm looking for shapes and nothing more. So now let me get into doing some shading. And as I start to do that, what I'm going to start thinking about is applying a full tonal value right across the figure. And the reason I'm going to be doing that is because we're going to utilize an eraser as well in this drawing. I'm going to put down a tone and use my eraser to then remove that tone. We call it a negative pull. It's a good way of using an eraser as a drawing implement, drawing tool. So It allows you to really start to establish bigger, almost like you're painting with graphite, painting bigger swashes of color down, knowing that you can then remove it. And you see them using the side of my Blick Studio 6B pencil. Right? That's my choice of my sketch here. It's putting down. I can work very, very lightly, or I can go in pretty darkly. And I'll see at the end if the very last thing I'll do for these dark shadows right there and underneath the hat brim and the jawline of Andrew, what if I want to go with a darker graphite or darker pencil. But at this point, it's just a good sketching device. So I'm going to continue to put down some shade in here, and then the next step will be to pull out my eraser and start removing some of what I just put down. Kind of a put down, pull off. Well, I pause right now just to show you that at this point, often I'll do an entire drawing in this process, but I want to pause to let you show what I'm doing. I'm going to now use my kneaded eraser here to start to pull off some of that graphite, as I've mentioned. Now, if you've never used a kneaded eraser, they are moldable, and you can put them in any shape you want, and sometimes you want to have a blunted spot or sometimes really sharp, and that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to come back in on that some of that spots in the graphite and just remove it. So when you're drawing something like fabric and you're trying to capture folds, it might be a nice opportunity to come back in and just lift it. Another way to help with that process is to use an eraser, like this Tombow Mono Zero. Has like a chiseled edge to it. They come in a pointed one as well. And I can come in and really fine tune some of the small little details that I might want to capture in this jacket that's caught my eye to really help with the folds of the fabric. So I'm going to do that back and forth. I'm maybe in the hat right there, the little brim right there. In a lot of spots too is I'm going to remove my edge line, and we call that the linear line that goes around the drawing. I would like to just have a value against a value and get rid of any strong edges that aren't needed. So I'm going to follow that same procedure right over onto NC, and then do my background and call it a day. So. Well, I think I'm about done working on the Strathmore Tone Gray paper. One thing I failed to mention as I drew was to take advantage of the different strokes you can use. In the NC, Andrew, in the NC figures, I had a lot of vertical strokes, and in the background, I used a lot of horizontal strokes. That can sometimes push your characters forward or have them recede into the background, whatever you like to do. So switching up the gears on the stroke direction is something that can trick the eye into having some things happen where it doesn't get lost. The values were a lot funner to play with on this toned paper, and I think if I do much more to it, I'll just end up making it a little bit muddier. So thank you for watching, and I hope you stop by and visit us again here at the Two Bridges Art Academy, and look forward to seeing you in some classes.